I built 3 startups from scratch in 30 hours using Claude Code and Codex. Full run from idea to live apps on a server with monetization. In this video I'll show how I found and straight up stole ideas, how I vibe coded 3 projects at the same time, how I thought the design and why it looks kinda cringe, where AI boosted me hard and where it slowed me down, and also why I dropped one project after 9 hours and started it from scratch. Let's roll. Hi, my name is Oleg. In my daily life I'm a software engineer, but on this channel I'm a vibe coder. Here I build small projects, experiment with AI, test models and tools. Right now, building small solo projects is trending up. Programmers, product managers, marketers, basically anyone who's ever wanted to launch something on their own are now building projects for their own needs. That's because with AI, the implementation process is getting easier every month. In previous videos I also talked about my small startups. Last fall I even did a challenge where I built a startup in a speedrun format using Claude Code. Back then it took me around 40 hours. The front-end part was painful and AI kept leaving bugs, but overall it was an interesting experience. However, starting with models like GPT 5.2 and Opus 4.5, the scale of tasks that AI can handle has increased significantly. In some tests I was able to build almost complete services from scratch with a one-shot prompt. That's when I got the idea to repeat the speedrun challenge, but this time working on several ideas at once. So today you'll see what came out of it. Let's start with ideas. The best way to find good ones is your experience and personal pain points. So the first 2 ideas came directly from me. For the first project, I decided to focus on support automation, essentially generating auto-replies to typical incoming messages. I often get messages about ads on Telegram and via email. At some point, I realized that most of my replies are either copy-pasted templates with pricing or AI-generated text that I ask GPT to write in response to formal English emails. Writing them manually doesn't make much sense. So I figured I needed a simple AI assistant that could process incoming messages in email and Telegram, leaving only truly important ones or making decisions for me. For the MVP, I started with Telegram auto-replies. It became much easier recently because Telegram added the ability to connect a bot directly to your personal account. No more complicated integrations or risk of getting banned. The second idea has been spinning around for a while. All my videos use simple infographics. I usually create them manually in Excalibur or similar tools. But honestly, the quality isn't great and it takes quite a lot of time. So what I want is, first, graphics that are fast and good looking, without spending time drawing schemes or learning complex editing techniques. Making videos of experiments is already hard enough, so I don't want editing to slow things down even more. Second, a simple way to reuse a consistent visual style across videos. So I decided to build a generator that creates infographics from text input. It should allow prompting styles, reusing them, reviewing in the browser, making small edits, and rendering them as video inserts. And for the third project, I used a different approach. I decided to just steal an idea. I went to platforms like TrustMRR and Indie Hackers products to find existing microprojects that actually make money. The key feature there is that you can see real revenue stats pulled directly from payment provider APIs. So the data is reliable. At first I browsed projects manually, then I got lazy and asked my GPT Pro to analyze these platforms and trends and generate a table with ideas, competitor links and revenue data. One interesting example was Translate.mom, which makes about $5,000 per month doing simple transcription and translation of videos. No complex lip sync features, just subtitles and basic voiceover. A solid candidate to copy. I stick to the same tech stack across projects: backend Python plus Fast API, frontend Next.js, database Postgres. To make coding agents validate builds and compilation, I use a set of rules. They are loaded automatically from my GitHub repo via a custom skill. These rules also include guidelines for authorization, project structure, Git workflow, AI integrations, payments, etc. I also use a starter template with real integration examples and architecture already set up. In this experiment I used both Claude Code and Codex CLI. I assigned tasks based on mood and limits. I started with the $200 ChatGPT Pro plan, more than enough. I didn't even hit half the weekly limit, so toward the end I switched to the $100 plan. That one started struggling closer to the end. Might not be enough for such long experiments. Claude Max for $100 also hit its limits quickly with Opus. And overall, about 80% of the code was written by GPT with extra high reasoning. First GPT 5.4 and then 5.5 after the update. So how did the work itself look like? I prepped a file with project descriptions after running service ideas through Claude to get a closer look at the upcoming problems. For the infographics generator, I simply gave part of that file plus my template and asked it to implement everything, including env configs. The logic wasn't complex and integrations were familiar. Then I kicked off the development task, and after that I just tested things and fixed small pieces along the way. For the support bot, it was slower. The Telegram integration was new to me, so I first researched it using Claude. Then I built a simple echo bot to test the setup. Only after confirming it worked, I moved on. For new tech, I always test things in isolation first. It helps catch issues early, before the development even begins. And the third project turned out to be even more complicated. At first, I actually wanted to work on a completely different idea. I planned to push my AutoCutting script to a full release, the one that extracts good takes from raw talking head footage. The script is super useful and really speeds up video production, but the algorithm is insanely complex. It needs heavy and long testing every time you make changes. On top of that, the ideal version of this project should be either a video editor plugin or some kind of desktop app. The reason is simple. Video files usually weigh tens or even hundreds of gigabytes, and working with them in web app without uploading them to a server is basically not realistic. But desktop apps and plugins come with their own hidden complexity, and I didn't have much experience building that kind of stuff. So I decided not to include this idea in the challenge, though that decision didn't come immediately. It only happened a few hours into the experiment. I did try to vibe code something based on the original script, but it didn't lead anywhere good. So about 9.5 hours into the challenge, I dropped the autocutter idea and switched to copying the translate.mom concept instead. On the first day, I worked for 4 hours and got decent demos. 2 projects at once were manageable, 3 were pretty hard. From previous experience, I knew long dev sessions don't work well. Vibe coding is still not as easy as you might think. You constantly need to consider, test and plan next steps. So I kept sessions between 30 minutes and 4 hours. Using my rules and project templates, I added good authentication, limits, credits and payments early. Started letting users in as soon as the product resembled something usable. I used Lemon Squeezy for payments. It allows you to operate as a private entity without opening a company. I made a test shop there and rolled it for all my speedrun projects. Then I deployed early to test everything properly. For convenience, I now install Coolify on all my servers. It's a powerful open source control panel that lets you deploy pretty much anything and monitor your services, including getting alerts in Telegram. You can manage environment variables and set up auto deployments from GitHub updates. For the first deployment with Coolify, I did everything manually, because my MCP setup for working with it was only configured for a different server, and I didn't want to reconfigure everything. But after a couple of deploys, I realized doing it manually was way too slow. So I started asking the agent to push changes to Coolify via its API. To clarify, the actual deployments were already happening automatically after pushes to GitHub. Coolify handles that very well, but setting environment variables, configuring domains, and analyzing service logs was taking a lot of time and attention. It was much easier to delegate those tasks to coding agents by giving them the Coolify API key. After deployment, it was time to buy domains and set up payment webhooks. There weren't any major difficulties there. I came up with these domains: Mr. Support, Chertilla, and Slop Tools. I actually struggled for a while to come up with a good name for the auto-reply service, but Mr. Support just stuck with me. It's kinda cringe, but that's exactly what makes it memorable. After choosing the domains, it was time to make designs. Without guidance, AI generates very generic designs. Claude tends to use purple, GPT goes for beige, book-like styles. Neither will do. I also tried Claude Design. It looked clean but not unique. To match the vibe with the name of Mr. Support, I went with an old school 90s office software style. I generated a logo like that and then tried to style the whole site around it. At first it came out a bit extreme, but I gradually toned it down into something more balanced. For the other two projects I didn't go that deep, just tweaked the default AI colors a bit. I also want to single out the translator transcriber service that originally was a copy of translate.mom. The plan was simple: buy a subscription, screenshot everything, copy all the text, feed it into Codex and ask it to recreate it. But something went horribly wrong. Every attempt to build something working or even reasonably structured failed. I even tried downloading the rendered HTML of the site to use as a reference, but the agent still produced something pretty ugly and not very functional. In the end, I gave up on that approach. I decided to pivot the project into a simpler direction, keep only transcription and simplify the subscription model. Just 3 transcriptions per day for free, and for $29 a year you get 50 hours of quota. The simplest possible flow. The user uploads a video, clicks transcribe and downloads the result as text or an SRT file with timestamps. Sure, I could have made a more complex version work, but for now it's better to stick to one core feature. No need to overload it with 10 extra features and buttons. Extra stuff just confuses both the coding agent and the user. For example, Mr. Support turned out fairly complex on its own. Even the core auto-reply feature requires the user to understand how the algorithm works. So to prevent users from getting stuck right after signing up, I had to put together a basic onboarding flow. For the other products, I haven't done that yet, since their functionality seems pretty straightforward. Let's take a look at what we've got after 30 hours. The Mr. Support app looks roughly like this. The bot works with text files that act as guidelines for how it should respond. You can upload them, create new ones and update them. You can also leave feedback on messages the bot sent or was about to send. Based on that feedback, the system adjusts their guidelines so future responses improve. As an extra feature, you can enable an agent mode, which lets the bot call external tools over HTTP, notify the owner, and store information in files. I tried to make the landing page clear and straightforward, answering the obvious questions about the product. After signing up, the user goes through onboarding. The system explains how to set everything up and guides them to their first auto-reply. Then, after onboarding, the user sees the subscription page with an option to activate a 7-day trial. The infographics generator is simpler. After signing up, the user can choose a style or create their own, either via prompt or manually. Then they enter a prompt for the visuals, click generate, and within about a minute get an animation. Then it can be rendered into a video in the desired resolution with one click. That's it. The transcriber is even simpler. Upload the video, click transcribe, download the result. Done. To wrap things up, I'll share a few thoughts that came to me while working on these projects. The main thing that stood out is that the speed and ease of building projects right now doesn't depend as much on how powerful the AI model is, but rather on how many templates, refined stacks, and development workflows are at hand. If you already have the source code for something similar, building a second version is dramatically easier than starting from scratch, even with the model on steroids. Another big factor is the balance between backend and frontend work. If your product is a console app or a pure server-side API, AI can really carry the development. But if you need to build a lot of functionality in some kind of visual editor, my condolences then. For tasks like that, the default approach with Claude Code and Codex doesn't work really well. Models lazily check front-end output, and in general they don't understand what looks good for users. And one last thing. Vibe coding feels very different depending on the stage of development. At the beginning, when you are dealing with broken scripts and messy design, it's just painful. But once the project starts working and has some shape, polishing details with AI becomes quite enjoyable. It pulls you in, and at some point it even becomes hard to stop and say, that's it, the product is done. Well, that's my experience in a nutshell. All links are in the description. Check them out if you will, you might even like them. Subscribe to the channel, I'll keep experimenting with AI, showing you the results. That's all for today, see you in the next video.